Hello guys and welcome to video lesson 1 and maybe only I think of our week number 7. I want to start by reminding you that this is the last week before we start or before we have our test number 1, the midterm test that we will have in the week number 8. Okay, so it is very important that you revise your concepts, that you take a look at your notes if you have them. Otherwise, check the presentations, maybe rewatch one more time the video of a particular topic that was maybe not so clear for you. Well, do anything that is in your power in order to be prepared for the test. And if you require some additional clarification, I'll be more than happy to help you with that. Okay, we are also going to have a synchronic session in which we're going to discuss certain things about the test. We're going to have it this week. I think that most likely on Friday. So we will be discussing a little bit about that. So if you have any questions, proposals, or things like that, please let me know. Yeah, I think that's it. So as usual, I would like to share with you a little poem to start the class. This time it is by Homero Aritis, that is a Latin American poet, and it is called Tercer Poema de Ausencia. Tú has escondido la luz en alguna parte y me niegas el retorno. Sé que esta oscuridad no es cierta porque antes de mis manos volaban las luciérnagas. Y yo te buscaba y tú eras tú, y éramos unos ojos en el mismo lecho, y nadie de nosotros pensaba en el eclipse. Pero nos hicimos fríos y conocidos, y la noche se hizo inaccesible para bajarla juntos. Tú has escondido la luz en otros ojos, porque desde que ya no existes, nada de lo que está junto a mí amanece. Well, I really like this poem because I think that it has a lot to do with those times in which couples are really good and have lovely relationships and have good times. So they develop a bonding that is really important or really nice. Nevertheless, eventually, this seems to have happened to the character in the poem. Maybe routine, right? Maybe inertia, and well, they seem not to be together anymore, right? And apparently, this other person is with somebody else. That is why, like this slide that he mentions, that was so important and so meaningful for him, is no longer available. So nice, because I think that, of course, the situation itself is not necessarily nice, but I believe that he is able to condense a lot of experiences in a really short poem. So, well, that's a good talent, right? Well, guys, we're going to discuss right now the I would say the last learning school of thought that we are going to study during this course, and it's that of Carl Rogers. So if you can go to the slide number 31 of the presentation, you will find some information over there. Remember that we talk about the hierarchy of Maslow last week, in the last video. So I finished saying that the last list, the one that we have about psychologically healthy people, sounded a little bit like self-help, like those I don't know, lists that you can find in a variety magazine that are not really scientific or something like that. And well, that is the introduction to what we have here on Rogers. Well, this is more of a personal opinion. I think that Rogers was clearly misunderstood and maybe even taken advantage of. I think that his theory was a little bit twisted, and maybe his intention was different, but the relevancy seems superfluous. I mean, seems, if you look it through the lens of modernity, it sounds like what he proposes is really obvious and really like light, right? Nevertheless, well, it's one of the important mm, theoreticals in the field, so it's important to take a look at it. Okay, so let's see what we can find. If you take a look at the first part over there, it says that self-actualization and natural drive towards potential is very similar to Maslow, right? So Rogers buys this idea of Maslow, in which, let's say, he proposes that self-actualization is a little bit innate, that it comes programmed genetically or from birth somehow for us, and there is this drive, this motivation that it's sort of natural in us human beings, and this drive is always like directing us into potential, right? Like being better, learning more, knowing more, acting in better ways, being somehow optimistic towards this, let's say, innate good or potential for good in human beings, right? Now, what is like the main difference, or what are some of the main differences that we find over here in Rogers? So first of all, he conceives this self-actualization or drive towards potential as an ongoing process, right? Like he eliminates this peak of the pyramid in which we reach our maximum potential and we will have to start again. That is Maslow's proposal. He says no, that we're never going to reach our maximum potential, and that is why the process is ongoing, it's non-stop, right? So that's one of the main differences. Now, there's something over here that is a little bit Freudian, I would say, and hopefully we have the time, because we never do because of many things that happen in the semester, to talk about some generic impressions about psychoanalysis and some other psychological theories that are not necessarily like completely connected with education, such as the ones from Freud and Lacan and Jung. Yes, so hopefully we have the time in this modality. I would like that very much, because even though it's not directly related to education, not necessarily, I mean, it is really, really important that a teacher knows about that. So I was saying that this has some sort of Freudian connection, right? Because he proposes that the childhood upbringing, right, the way in which you are raised as a kid, the way your family educates you somehow, even before your first contact with school, is essential for your personality. Yes, your adult personality is always going to be intersected by the role of your mother had. Yes, understand mother as your biological mother, as a tutor, as your grandma, your aunt, or whoever took care of you when you were a kid, or even sometimes even like fathers, right? But let's say that he makes a huge emphasis on mothers, right? So if you take a look at the picture that you find over there on the right, you will see that he proposes that a healthy personality derives from the mother and conditional love, like a positive regard. I am simplifying this a lot because the theory is much longer, right? But to make it like clear for you, or just simplistic in a simplistic way that we require for our labor as educators, basically he suggests that your mother is supposed to love you no matter what. Yes, no matter what you do, this approval is supposed to come from her directly and with no conditions, right? Now, of course, he has some regards about punishments and about discipline, sure. Like it doesn't mean that your mother has to let you do whatever you want, or like provide no structure, or provide no framework of behavior. No, it's not that. But he proposes that he is not supposed to. She's not supposed to like condition her manifestations of love, right? Like if I don't know, if the baby cries, she's not supposed to pretend that she's angry and then disregard him or somehow ignore him. Now she may have like a some sort of a consistent or firm behavior, but without denying the love or depriving the kid of these manifestations of love, right? So this must be opposed to conditional positive regard. Yes. So this, let's say, behavior of positive reinforcement that we had with Skinner, in which if you behave correctly, you were given some sort of reward. Well, he's completely opposed to that. Yes, he says that that is going to limit your personality. Yes, he's going to develop to make some sort of deformation to your development of as a self, no, as an individual. Basically, you will be replicating the behavior other people implanted in you. That if you take a look at it, it doesn't sound so, so crazy. No, it's reasonable somehow. It makes sense. But well, that is what he says. Like whenever this love or this positive regard is conditioned, well, that is going to alter your personality and it's not going to let you be yourself, right? So hopefully, if you have a good upbringing, if you have a good relationship with your mother or tutor, you will become a psychologically healthy person, right? If you take a look at Maslow, he had a list of about 10, let me see. Like 10 like characteristics. Well, he sort of reduced this into half, right? So he has about 5 feats of 5 traits that people that are psychologically healthy people are supposed to have. And remember that this is supposed to be a consequence of how good your relationship with your mother was, right? So, first of all, an openness to all experience. So, if you're psychologically healthy, you should be sort of open to experience things either directly or secondhand. Yes, like you're not normally afraid of trying new things, right? And this will include like different things, right? Like different fields, academic, personal, relationships, food, geographical, movement, well, etc. Right? Because your mother did not limit you so much, so you couldn't sometimes, and that is what Rogers proposes. Sometimes you can be so limited by your mother or by your caretaker that you're afraid of trying new things, going new places, getting to know new people, or you always have the same profile for your boyfriends or girlfriends, right? If you put them together, like they all have the same characteristics, they more or less are, tall and maybe they are sort of smart or something like that, and you don't feel attracted to some other things, right? So that is what he says, no? Like casting a type is sort of like a consequence, a type of anything, right? Sort of a consequence of this, right? So if you're a little bit more open to variety, it is because you have a better upbringing. That's what he proposes. Then an ability to live fully in every moment, right? And you see, like this sounds so like optimistic, self-help, something like that. Like, leave your mom and if it was the last one. A little bit like that, right? But that is what he proposes, that you're able to take advantage of every, let's say, moment of your life without a lot of restrictions. The will to follow their own instincts rather than the will of others. And this has a lot to do with what I mentioned before. So if you were very restricted or limited as a kid, you are normally waiting for direction. You're waiting for somebody to lead the way, and you mistrust yourself somehow. Yeah, because you have been used to the fact of receiving orders somehow, right? Freedom in thought and action. For example, you're a spontaneous person, a flexible person, and you're a creative one. Yes. So if you analyze these traits, which some of them are systematic and let's say quantifiable ones of the first theories that we propose. When we were talking about the Ratzinger, like we could talk about specific hours and frequencies and processes, right? The same for Pavlov, right? But here this seems like too general, no? Like too blurry, um, and seems so optimistic now. Like it depends, like definitely from you, and that is what actually, like he proposes, right? If you take a look at the final characteristic on the left, we see something that it's an acronym that is the PCT, yes, person-centered therapy, right? So we're dealing with something that is incredibly obvious but at the same time tricky, and it's this person-centered therapy. And it's if you go to a psychologist that is sort of a therapist, let's say, that is using Rogers as his guideline or somehow beacon of imitation, well, everything it will be your responsibility. Yes, the client is responsible for his own progress, not the therapist. So this sounds like you are responsible for your own motivation, you're responsible for improving yourself, you're responsible for eliminating your own undesirable or negative behaviors, you are responsible for, everything is in your hands, right? So why do you pay the therapist at all? But, well, that is what this sort of theory proposes. Now, if we go to the next slide that is in the 3.2, you will verify this idea of self-concept, right? And this self-concept has three components that are really easy to get, yes? So let's say that we have this ideal self, that is everything you would like to be. Physically, if, I don't know, maybe your let's say your utmost or deepest desire is to be ripped and to be thin and to be fit, and I don't know, have a specific amount of hair and let's say quality and the way you look and your skin and everything in physical things. But then you also would like to be outgoing and to be funny and to be intelligent and to, well, so think about that you always wanted to be, like that the best version of yourself that has all his or her potential realized, and that will be your ideal self, right? Everything that you ever dreamed to be. Then you have your self-image, that is how do you see yourself, right? Like do you feel uncomfortable sometimes when wearing certain clothes because you look fat according to yourself, right? Because you're not feeling so attractive as you could. Maybe you believe that you could do better in the academics, you could have better grades. Maybe you think that your clothes could be fancier. Maybe you think that probably you could have nicer friends, better relationships, more healthier ones. Maybe maybe your family interactions could be a little bit better. Well, whatever you think about your self-image, that hopefully is good or bad or regular, but well, hopefully it's good, right? So the difference or the distance between your ideal self and your self-image it's going to be like your self-esteem. This sounds like almost mathematical, right? And I know that it's really difficult to make these quantitative approximations when we're dealing with human behavior, right? But it is presented in this way. So the distance between the ideal self and the self-image is going to give the self-esteem. So if there is a large gap, yes, between what you want to be and what you are, or what you believe you are, so your self-esteem is going to be low, right? It's not going to be so good. But if your ideal self and your self-image are pretty close, so your self-esteem will be high. Again, this sounds like so evident, right? But that is what Rogers proposes over here. So basically, the idea is that this self-concept idea, right, maybe worked from different angles, right? Because the idea is that you reduce the distance between your ideal self and your self-image, so you can have better self-esteem, right? And you can do this theoretically through many different instruments, right, or many different approaches. The first one would be, reduce your expectations, right? So if you're really far away, maybe your ideal self is, too dreamy. You're never going to get there. That would be like Rogers' approach, no? And you're never going to get ripped. Probably will be a little bit thinner than you are right now, but if you want to be Schwarzenegger, maybe that's not the case. So reduce the expectations, right? And about everything else, money, etc. So in that way, the ideal self and the self-image will be a little bit closer. Or the other way will be, do not reduce the expectations, maintain them that way. But then you have to sort of, in the self-image, you have to try harder, right? So get more exercise a week, study more, work harder, and try to be a nicer person, etc. And in that way, your self-image is going to catch up at some point with your ideal self. Well, that's basically it, right? And what does it all have to do with learning? Well, it is a little bit nebulous, right? Because remember that we're dealing here with learning, no? So hopefully in the process of reaching your ideal self, you're going to learn. Yes, you're going to learn how to be a better person. You're going to learn academic things, professional things, practical things, emotional things. You're going to develop a higher emotional intelligence, etc. Right? So this process of learning is somehow accidental. Yes, there is not a conscious approach like in many of the other ones, right? But I think that hopefully you have already noticed that, like the first process from Pavlov are very concrete, very harsh, very inhumane sometimes, and then we go back, we advance, and we start like considering people a little bit better, and we arrive over here to the complete extreme in which the individual is the only responsible for his or her happiness, corny as it sounds, right? So that's it. If we want to establish like a middle ground, it will be Oswald, maybe with his meaningful learning, that is in the middle between training, and routing, and this pretty general and somehow very emotional activism of Rogers, right? Now, as I mentioned before, many people have adapted this. I don't know if you know the guys over there in the picture, such as Paulo Coelho and this is Jaime Duque Linares. Well, if any of you feel comfortable with that and think that those sort of things help, great, be my guest. My opinion, and of course my academic opinion, is that this is dangerous in the way that basically this sort of self-help approaches, that is like an extreme form of the Rogers school, sort of cheats you into believing that only by wanting things to happen they will happen, and that's not the case. I'm afraid you're required to work hard and to do some sort of to have an actual plan, and to follow certain steps, and to effort yourself. Like the universe is not going to conspire in order to give you free things. That's my opinion in that case. So with this, we are going to close our theories of human learning. As I mentioned, there are some others, but these are the ones that we're going to deal with in the class. And let's say that this will be like the topics for the exam. Okay, so I'm going to stop over here. I will make a second video. I thought that it was going to be only one this week, but well, we're going to have a second one that will be quite short. We're going to make a general summary, a really short one, and I will discuss a little bit about the assignment for this week. Okay, so see you in the next video. Hugs. Thanks a lot.